Okay, so I have recreated my issue in a clean Laravel install, and now I know that this is a bug that I need to submit to GitHub. Now, the question is, do I have all the information? Do I have enough information? Does the issue already exist? These are all things that we're going to answer, and if we need to submit an issue, we're going to submit a great one. So let's go back and look at our code one more time, and I made it as simple as I could, but still made sure to model it the same way that I had the issue before. But one thing, this wire ignore, just because I know Livewire, a lot of people aren't using this regularly, and it certainly doesn't seem like something as simple as this functionality would be broken generally. So what I want to do is get rid of the wire ignores. And now let's just go back and retest it, because it's really important that I know, is the wire ignore a critical piece of this bug? And you can see here, everything's working the way I expect it if I have that wire ignore removed. So if we go back to our code, this is really the key. It's important that I figured this out, because if I open the issue without explicitly mentioning the wire ignore, then obviously it would have been an incorrect issue, and it probably would have been closed right away. So it's really important that you figure out as narrowly as possible what is the scope of your issue. So the key here in my issue are two things. The wrong div is disappearing when I'm using wire ignore on all of my divs. So that's what I want to do. So I want to open that issue, but I don't need to open that issue if it already exists. So let's go check that right now. So this is a really critical point. Don't open issues that already exists. That's, our goal is to be helpful here. Opening a duplicate issue is honestly the opposite of helpful. It creates maintenance work. The maintainer reviews it. Maybe he doesn't quite remember that it's a duplicate. Maybe he does, so he closes your issue and references the other one. That's a lot of work. That the maintainer of open source packages, they do so much work just to keep their packages, adding new features, fixing bugs, etc. Don't make them do the work for you to try to figure out if an issue is a duplicate or not. So I'm going to come in here and like I said, the key on my issue is that wire ignore. So I'm going to search wire ignore. And so there's only two issues, one open, one closed, related to wire ignore. This one, adding removing classes causes input contents to disappear. Doesn't sound like mine. If I look through it really quickly, look at some of the code he's using. Yeah, definitely not doing any of this JavaScript stuff here. So I don't think this is the same issue. And I would look more closely, but I have already done that and can tell you it's not the same. If I look at this is actually an issue I created a while ago, and this is definitely not the issue that I just opened. So I know it's not this one. So it looks like there's no issue related to what I've found. And I always do check pull requests. It's pretty uncommon that someone would open a pull request without opening an issue first. I always recommend open an issue first. But if I look through these, definitely nothing in here that looks like the same thing that I've encountered. So now I've recreated the issue, and I know that there's not an existing issue in GitHub. So we're good there. The other thing that's really important that I didn't mention before, if you're doing this, if you're not creating a clean Laravel install, make sure you're on the latest version of the code. You might have in your composer file, set yourself to a specific version for some reason. Don't open issues on outdated versions of a package, because if you do, you have no idea if that one has been addressed in a future release. So that's another really good benefit of creating a fresh instance of Laravel and reproducing your issue there, is you're also on the latest version. So anyways, I know I have an issue to open, so let's go ahead and click the issues here, and let's go ahead and create one. So you just click this new issue button, Livewire gives me an option. Is it a bug report or a feature request? This is obviously a bug report. And what this is going to do is give me a template. This is what the maintainer wants to know when an issue is opened. So he's got this template. Describe the bug. How do you reproduce it? What's the expected behavior? Give me a screenshot. All of this is what we're going to work on now. Now, I don't want to have you watch me type everything. Actually, this came through because I had already done this just before. What is the title? So usually that wouldn't be there. And this is the title I came up with. And when I came up with this title, what I'm really thinking about is, if I encountered this issue, what am I going to search for? The key is wire ignore. So this is the number one thing I want to make sure is in my title. The second thing is like the wrong div disappears. So I think this is a really good title, and think about it. Because again, the key thing is someone else might run into this issue while the issue is still open, and you want to make sure that people can find it. So now we need to describe the bug. The bug is, this should be kind of a summary. I've typed this. I have 3 divs. Each has wire ignore applied to it, which this is the key. And then the second div should show or disappear. The second div should show or disappear based on the value in the first. When the second is supposed to disappear, the third disappears. So that pretty clearly explains what the problem is. To reproduce, I'm going to copy this over. This one is generally where you're going to put the most effort and the longest amount of work into your issue. And even if the template doesn't ask for this, I highly recommend giving the maintainer your steps to reproduce. So let's start from the top. Create a new Laravel project and install Livewire. This again is important. You want to mention this in your issue because the gut reaction of a maintainer might be, were you on the latest version? Is this something related to your code? This tells the maintainer, no, this is definitely something that is an issue with Livewire. So now I walk through the steps, which we just walked through before. Create a component, give code examples. This is so important because, and you'll see it in almost every issue. And of course, because how am I going to reproduce the issue if I don't know what code you wrote? So this is another reason why it's so important to do this in a fresh Laravel instance. Because if I took the code from my SaaS application with all the other classes and nonsense and different things on it, then anyone who looks at this, they're not even going to consider it's a real issue. They're going to say the issue is probably in all that other junk. So you don't want to make it hard for someone to see clearly that this issue is a part of the package or the framework. So again, really important to create that fresh Laravel install and then copy the code from there and put it here. If you can't do that for some reason, then make sure you explain to the maintainer, what it is that the other code around, the core functionality is of the framework, and help them understand what it's doing and how it might be impacting the bug that you're having. Okay, step 3 is just updating the component file with this public value. And then step 4 is, let's clarify in the browser, when you change the select in the first div, the third div disappears instead of the second. So this is what I want. The expected behavior, this is pretty simple. I expect the second div to disappear when the value is 0. All right, screenshots. If you want to add a screenshot or maybe even an animated GIF or GIF, you can do that, and that could be really helpful. I think this is so simple and self-explanatory. I don't need to do that, so I'll just delete that section. What desktop are you using? What browser? I'm just going to say latest version of Chrome on a Mac. And then I don't have any additional context. So this is a pretty good issue. You can go here and preview. If you didn't really understand why I was using backticks and things like that, that's Markdown. If you're not familiar with Markdown, I do recommend learning it and using it to format your GitHub issues a lot more nicely. If this was not in a code block, it would be kind of really difficult to read. Another thing that you can notice here, I added even comments inside the code that make it even more clear what's going on. Because maybe in my description it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but I think these comments really clear it up. So this is a great issue. I think it's ready. And the next thing we just need to do is submit it. So I'm going to submit my issue. And now it's done. Now, the one thing that I talked about briefly a little bit before is maybe it's important that people can find this issue, because if someone else has it, maybe they find a workaround, or maybe you found a workaround. Because just knowing what I know about Livewire, this is an edge case. There's not a lot of people that are using this wire ignore, using it in 3 consecutive divs, which I'm not completely sure that is the root cause of this, because I don't know the code as well as the maintainer does. But I think this is probably an edge case. So I don't even know if the maintainer is ever even going to fix this issue. I know myself, I wouldn't know how to fix it, to try to submit a PR to fix it. And if it's really complex and it's really obscure, he may not fix it. And so another thing that is important is to provide a workaround, not just for yourself, but for other people. And there's actually a workaround. If I go to the Laravel Livewire website, go to the docs, when I found this issue, I went into this troubleshooting section, which is a great section for any package to have. So this is a DOM diffing issue, and it gives a couple of potential options. How do you fix it? So I look at this first one, add a wire key to the elements inside a loop. I'm not actually using a loop, but here's another thing, wrap blade conditionals in an element. And then just generally add a wire key. So this is one that I think maybe could work for me. So I'm going to go back to my code and just give this a wire key equals first, and it'll be second, and this will be third. Okay, so now if I go back to my browser, reload, say no, I say yes, I say no. And now you can see it's working. So the great news is now my application can work. This is a workaround. Obviously, it would be great if Livewire worked out of the box, but just by adding that and using the documentation from Livewire, I was able to figure out a solution. So now what I want to do is go back to my issue, and I want to add my solution so anyone else who comes and finds it can see it. And I knew this workaround before I posted the issue, but I do recommend that you don't post it as a part of the original issue, but you post it as a comment. Because a lot of people if they find this because they're having the same issue, they're not going to look for the workaround in the original post. They're going to look for it as a reply. So now I just want to say, as a workaround, if you add wire key to each div, let's make sure it's explicit, equals unique identifier to each div, everything works as you would expect. Okay, and then what I can do is go back to my code and let's just copy that, go back here, add 3 backticks. Let's say the following code does work correctly. Let's preview it. And everything here looks good. So I'm just going to add this comment. Okay, so now we're done. We've submitted our issue. We've actually even provided a workaround for anyone else who would come and find this issue. And we've made it really easy for the maintainer to reproduce it. And if he decides he wants to fix it, which understand, it's not his job to fix it. But if he does decide to fix it, he's got a really nice way to figure out what's going on. I know I've been helpful. I've been helpful to the maintainer. I've been helpful to anyone who has this issue and is able to find what I just posted here. So I'm really happy with what I've done here. I've opened a great GitHub issue. Now let's move on to submitting your first PR, and we're going to talk about docs and README PRs.